Yeah. All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Wednesday and wrapping up this month talking about depression. And as I said, trying to think of a bunch of stories or examples of people who kind of battled this topic and fought through. So, just a reminder of going through that email. It was less writing and thoughts about me and just more some opportunity to read what other people have written about it. So, we'll touch base on that a little bit here, just some reminders about why I accumulated those three together. I just think that number one, everybody kind of learns lessons from depressions at one point, whether they go through it themselves or somebody else. And how can you take some lessons from what you watched in those half dozen videos or links to be able to follow? Because we can be informed about what to do and what not to do, right? It's an example of why Wednesday mornings are helpful, because maybe there's one thing that I've said or somebody else has said that just connects with you and you can integrate into your life and your challenges. Second, this lesson to realize that sometimes fighting depression takes a lot of effort over an extended period of time. Particularly, the examples of stories of people are like, I've been fighting this since I was a kid. I mean, certainly that's an example of maybe a third of the population. It's not a kind of something they encounter in a certain decade of their life. It might be something that they've been facing for as long as they can remember. And that teaches a lot as well. And then this idea of please take advantage of any kind of resource that's out there, whether you work for a larger employer and they've got EAP sessions that doesn't cost you a thing, or we've got that counseling benefit here at the gym that doesn't cost anything for you. Even support groups that exist throughout the communities in different cities where we all live. Whatever it might be, even health systems have a lot of resources for you, whether it's telehealth or just educational services. It's like at this day and age, there should be really no a barrier or obstacle to getting help in some way, shape, or form. So that's why a lot of those examples were found and chosen. But related to that, I wanted each of you as some homework assignments. Number one, just to kind of tell your story to somebody else. It doesn't mean you struggled with depression, but you've probably been through a period of time where it was uncertain, where you were sad about something, dealing with some grief. And when you encourage somebody around you, you might be that missing piece for them. So engage them with your story, encourage them, but also recognize that when you're talking with them, they might say something to you that is uplifting to you and encouraging. Because that connectedness, that community can happen, and the stronger it is, it helps. As an example, last week I was trying to wrap up all my CEUs for my license. Right, it's due this week, Bill. You know that, right? Get it done if you haven't. But reading some articles and realizing that when we talk about feeling alone and isolation, isolation is one of the biggest key factors when it comes to suicidal ideation and high risk. So when people feel isolated, and they're both literally and figuratively isolated, it's one of the key factors of why depression can lead to something in that really significant level of despair where suicidal ideation lies. So when we talk of community and getting connected and being transparent, it's one of the best ways to pull yourself or other people back from some of the worst forms of what depression can offer. So I gave some examples on Monday, but here are just some more of people that I thought was interesting. They had a story about depression that I thought was interesting. Certainly, some of my favorite movies tend not to be romantic comedies, but more of action. So you think of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. A part of his story was that he saved his mother from a suicide attempt at the age of 15 and had to grow up in a house with a lot of mental health and depression going on. So, an article, I'll post the article where it was. A brief interview with him was talking about just how much he had to deal with kind of depression from a parent. And that's a big example of a lot of kids and youth who are growing up. So, it's something to take from it. Even John Hamm, the actor from Mad Men, said depression was rough after his dad died while in college. And that's a big example. I love working with upper high schoolers and college age students because it's so formative. But when a big event like that happens, a parent dies. Many times right now, it's divorce that hits when kids are in college because couples have been holding it together until their kids go off to college and they get divorced. It's the same thing. It's a big, giant loss of like, my home is gone. What do I do? So recognizing that even a guy like John Hamm had to deal with this kind of world that kind of blew up on him when he was in college. So it's an example from him. Kristen Bell, who voiced Anna in Frozen, says she's had depression since college and speaks about it to continue to inform people. So it's kind of like that homework assignment of the more you talk about what you've gone through, the more you can be encouraging with others. Um, Bruce Springsteen talked about depression in his 60s, and he used this great phrase. He said it engulfs you. I often talk about depression as a fog that kind of comes around and it's hard to get through. So I thought that's a good phrase that he talked about. In the same article, Ashley Judd talked about her dysfunctional childhood that affected her so much that in 2006 she had to seek out some private inpatient treatment to deal with that. And that's a reality. What some people go through is they just grow up in a dysfunctional area, a lot of chronic kind of struggles, a lot of difficulty. And so even as an adult later on, you realize I have to do something significant to deal with this. Many times it's outpatient counseling, but sometimes it's some higher level of care, just like one of the videos I shared of somebody who took advantage of Rogers Behavioral Health, which is primarily on the eastern side of the state. And someone's like, I got to go deal with this before it affects me longer and more difficultly. And then finally, J.K. Rowling, right, who writes the Harry Potter series, she said her depression inspired the dark mood of her depression inspired the creatures called the Dementors in that movie, which I think is just a great visual kind of representation of what negative thoughts can be like, what depressive moods can be like, how the pit of people's stomachs fall when they feel like their depression is acting up. So it really is a good visual of what's going on. So all in all, there's like a dozen different stories there that come from a lot of different socioeconomic statuses, a lot of different levels of success, everyday people, or some of the world's most famous people. I'm just trying to do that to illustrate that depression is very, very broad. It does not just, hit certain types of people with certain backgrounds, but it's highly likely that somebody you know, or at some point in your life, past, present, or future, there's been some degree of depression that's come in. So it is kind of in this week of saying it's possible to overcome it, because look at all these other examples of people who've been able to do that and be inspired by them. So a couple of questions with us this morning. I've given lots of other examples of things, but here's a question for us. Is there a person that you know who's inspired you as he or she dealt with depression? Somebody that was in your circle or support network or community that you were like, man, this person did a pretty incredible job, or has done, is doing, whatever it might be, fighting depression. And if it's hard to think about right now, just keep that in mind today. It's half the reason why I was talking about telling your story or asking people about theirs, because you'll probably be surprised of somebody who says, yeah, I've been going to counseling for years because I got to deal with this and this. Or, unfortunately, the only time we hear about someone who had depression is when probably we hear about a suicide. We're like, I had no idea that person was struggling with something. And that's just, I want to close that gap, that people are willing to talk about what's affecting them. So even if it's hard to think about that now, or maybe there's some hesitancy to share about it, please give some thought about that homework to just find out, check in with somebody, or tell somebody what that story is, or just look around, because there will be inspiration when you find out some background that someone has been living with for a long time, or they grew up in a home like this, and they're working with you and you had no idea, and they seem quite functionable, and they seem like they're a great person, and they're so happy all the time, and then suddenly you realize, oh, they've really worked hard to get to that spot. So it's a good question. Keep thinking about it. Who has inspired you about how they've dealt with depression? Maybe it's someone in your circle, or it's somebody that's outside of it, but you just appreciate what they've written or how they've done it. Maybe this question's a little bit easier. What have you learned or been told that is key to overcoming depression? What did you already know coming into this week or this month? So if someone asked you, hey, I'm really struggling, what would be one piece of advice you'd tell them so depression doesn't win as often?
Identifying your support system,
Mm.
finding people, and if you have a therapist or a counselor or
Yeah.
family, friends, somebody.
Yeah, plug somebody into that support network. Yeah. I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute here, but it's a great example, right? Isolation, I just said, is one of the key factors to make depression worse and lead to at-risk suicidal ideation. So getting them connected with community is good. Any others?
I had a coworker who was talking about her daughter, and she was saying that helping them break down like get to class was like too big of a step. But like I can sit up, I can let people around, I can stand up, I can brush my teeth. Like if she could do, I can do, can get her to that. But like small ones, going from bed to class was like her brain couldn't make that jump. So like talking about all the I cans could get her there. But
Yeah.
in teeny tiny little
Yeah.
cans, but that can get her there.
It's a good example. Reframing things, seeing what you can do versus can't, or taking smaller steps is really good. We said it a few months ago. People look for the one singular perfect solution to fix their problems, and it kind of keeps them trapped in a difficult situation. So, kind of letting go of that and adjusting expectations will really help break things up and bring some more success. Any other answers to that one?
Listening and affirming.
Hmm.
If they do have something hard, challenging going on, not just like rushing past it. Well, this is how we're going to fix it.
Yeah.
Right? Actually having that time where you're like, yeah, this sucks.
Yeah.
And you just be in the suffering.
Yeah, it's good. Listening, responding with empathy, right? You've all probably had a conversation with someone that you can tell they're just waiting to talk about themselves, right? And you're trying to talk about something important, and they're just ready to jump in and get it back to them. And just, it's like, don't be that person. Sit in that stuff is a great phrase, but listening and recognizing this person really needs to be heard. This person really wants to talk about. Many times I'll reference to the people training at my office. I'm like, when they come in to like it's like almost half the work's already been done once they come into the counseling office, because you've given your time. It's a quiet place. You're going to listen. They've already made that bridge of the courage to come into the office. It's like listening. If you just sit there, listen, and affirm, and there's some good data behind this, like that person will feel better coming out of the office alone, even before you have a chance to implement any ideas or interventions. So it's just a good lesson to learn that if professionals are just like, I just have to sit there really and create an environment, and there's a lot of good that's going to come. Well, everybody can do that on their own in their living room, over a cup of coffee, even sitting in a car with somebody. There's a lot of power in just creating an environment where you can be heard and someone listens to you with empathy and support. So it's very possible that each of us can do that as people. So really, some final comments here about this week and this month. Number one, the heart and your passion are good things to guard and hold on to during depression. In fact, I think it's some of the central pieces. Remember those negative thoughts we've talked about this month that just start to change identity. I'm helpless. I'm hopeless. I can't do anything. Those are really, really challenging. So whatever can be done to remind yourself that you have good in you, that you have good things you do. This is where lists and journaling and posting things so you can see it. Inspirational quotes sometimes are very, very meaningful to people. So keeping an eye on that really helps guard some of the energy and life that drive people when they're through difficult times. And it's especially crucial during depression because there's so much negative thinking that can come in. I think, we were talking about this a little bit about breaking things up. I would say the definition of successfully fighting depression might need to change for people. Maybe they go into it thinking success is, I leave this behind. I never struggle with it again. And one of the stories that was shared talks about someone's experience of something called acceptance and commitment therapy. And I like that one because it's basically saying the goal is not to eradicate this in your life. The goal is to get comfortable with it and kind of carry it with you as you go forward. And for those of us that have struggled with some kind of chronic struggle or pain or difficulty, you recognize, I have to live with this. How do I go forward? Grief is the best example of that because you wish that didn't happen. I wish everything could be back to normal, but it's not a reality. So it's this idea of how do I pick up this struggle I have or this difficulty, this thing I don't want, and how do I live and function going forward? So that's really a definition of success. It's a good example. Because if I keep going, if I wake up every morning and I live my life and I do my best, that's success. But you're still dealing with that wound or that difficulty or that absence of somebody. So success is not always, is depression never in my life again. Sometimes it's just getting up and going. That's a good success. And then finally, fighting something like depression is so consuming and overwhelming. It is always easier with others. I might say it is crucial to do with others. People who fight depression by themselves, it is a slow avalanche downhill. It's just hard to stop it once it starts going. So those people that are disconnected, those people that are trying to fight a significant mental health issue on their own, the chances, I would say, of them fighting that and doing well without talking to anybody else, without talking to a doctor, without doing anything, really will decrease the chances of them having any level of success. So some final comments about that this week. So continue to think about those questions that are sometimes hard to answer. Focus on those homework assignments this week, right? Share your story, listen to somebody else's, and I think everyone will feel a little bit better by the end. So coming back to looking ahead to next month, this has been a heavy, straightforward, direct month about depression. March will not be the same kind of theme and tone. Still got a few days to sort that out, but I appreciate you guys listening to something crucial because February, we haven't even had daylight savings time yet. And for those people that really miss good stuff, they're eager for next Sunday, I think, when daylight savings time hits, because February is long, dark, cold. I know some of you have birthdays, so you redeem it for yourselves in February. But for a lot of people, this month and even next, they're just itching to get to something better. So we're going to keep building on that theme of looking ahead and being ready for something good to come. So good to see everybody. Have a good workout today. Thanks.